I feel like Angela Rayner's a massive hypocrite.
I wasn't going to harangue her in that moment, and that I just wouldn't have felt comfortable doing that.
I think she absolutely should survive it.
Hello and welcome to Electoral Dysfunction from Sky News with me, Beth Rigby.
Me, Ruth Davidson.
And me, Harriet Harman.
Now we're back together after a long summer without you guys, and I have to say I was a little bit apprehensive about coming back to work because there's such a busy term, but what powered me through was being reunited with you two today, so that this has been the sunshine in a torrid political week. Yes, it has. So the ED band is back together. But it's not just me who's buzzing about it, because Susan WhatsApped us to say it's about time the three of us should start our own political party with no taxes on hair straighteners, dog food, lipstick and big necklaces. And I endorse that message.
I mean, I think we'd get some votes. I think we'd definitely get votes for that.
Well, Susan thinks everyone would vote for us.
Wasn't that the Women and Equality Party?
Oh, yeah. Do you want to start it again?
Was that the one Sandy Toksvig helped for? Yeah. They stood at the mayoral elections in London and stuff, didn't they?
They did quite a lot, and then they closed themselves down. I can't remember why.
They had some really interesting policies.
Because we've got hit equality now, Harriet, that's why.
Yeah. It's just that straight line of going forward for women's advancement with no setbacks on the road. just for listeners, that was irony.
Irony. But, yeah, Susan, thank you. I like
anyway,
that.
Look,
yeah.
I'm actually quite glad that recess is out of the way, because I think there is tons for us to talk about this week. Obviously, I mean, the story of the week, we're going to talk about Angela Rayner. She's in the middle of a pretty brutal storm at the moment over whether she paid enough tax or not when she bought a new house. Beth, I don't think I've ever seen her on television quite as emotional as in that interview with you. It looks as if she may have underpaid by £40,000 stamp duty on her new home. She says she didn't do it on purpose. But it'd be really good if you could kind of take us through that story a little bit. And especially if we could then have a chat, Harriet, about whether we think she's toast or not and what does happen next.
I actually only got her statement 5 minutes before I sat down with her. So that's a very long, detailed statement explaining what she'd done, explaining that she was referring herself to the Standards Commission. So lots of the questions that I had prepared were irrelevant because she'd already decided to refer herself and she'd already explained that she had underpaid the tax, etc. So it was about 20 minutes, I think. So you can listen to that in the feed and then come back to this because we're going to sort of unpack that a bit.
All I've done is try and support my family and help them. And, you know, the pictures that were some pictures of my children were put up again in the media. It's really distressing for them because they don't want to be in the public eye. It's distressing that they read stuff about me all the time anyway, but, you know, that they've got used to that. But the fact that they were subjected to that, and that the fact that I knew now that all of this information, they're really upset that the public perception based upon what has been put in the press is that somehow their mother was trying to do something dishonest or was trying to tax dodge or was being hypocritical.
So that was the Deputy Prime Minister there, Angela Rayner, talking to you, Beth, this week. I mean, my first reaction is how emotional she sounds there. And we've had a few messages in from listeners about it. So let's hear from Emma.
I would just really like to know from yourself, Beth, you know, how do you prepare for this type of quite challenging interview, which is, you know, more personal potentially than political, and, you know, how does it feel when you're doing those sessions? Do you find that uncomfortable, or is it something that you're kind of well prepared for and well equipped for across all of the different things you've done in your career?
Oh, thanks for that, Emma. That's a good question, and actually it gives me a way of just talking a little bit about the background to that interview. And I'd looked carefully at the story. I kind of understood about what was going on about her different homes, etc. But look, I got into the room. I got the statement from her 5 minutes before I was about to do the interview, which was only meant to be 10 minutes long. So it was one of these interviews where she had to say something on camera. And they were going to try and contain it as much as they could. And my job was to try and get to the heart of how she was feeling, what was going on, and could she survive it? Did she want to survive it? I've interviewed her a number of times. She's always robust, but she walked into the room and she was ashen and she looked like she had been upset. Like she looked like she was nervous about doing it. She looked really uncomfortable. I felt really uncomfortable. And then when we sat down and she did her opening statement and she started talking about the family, I realised in that moment I had all these ideas. I was going to ask her if she's going to have to resign. Is she going to have to refer herself to the Standards Commissioner? Did she underpay tax? But she'd admitted all of that in the statement, right? So to be honest, that interview really, I did it off reactions to her rather than a pre-planned interview. Sometimes you have an idea of what you're going into, then you get a statement and then you get the person and you're dealing with a very different type of interview. And in that scenario, there were difficult questions to ask her, which I did ask her. Her reputation, hypocrisy, she looked like a tax dodger to many people. Had she considered resigning? Had she considered resigning instead of revealing details about her family that she clearly did not want to do? Did the Prime Minister really back her? And if she did survive, has she killed off her reputation? I did ask her all of those things, but in the context of when you've got a person who's clearly finding it very difficult, I tried to ask her the questions that needed asking, but I wasn't going to harangue her in that moment, and that I just wouldn't have felt comfortable doing that. So I mean, that's how you handle it, but in these moments you have to do it kind of around what you're faced with, and that's what I was faced with. And really, she's in a way, I think, thrown herself partly to the court of public opinion. I think she was appealing to people to kind of understand the circumstances. She had to put her family out there in a way that I could tell she was absolutely hating. I think that's why she was really upset. But there's also a question about, she's referred herself to the Standards Commissioner, and this is the housing minister that has underpaid on tax, when she is the first politician on the Labour benches to really go at anyone that themselves gets caught in that. So that there's so much in this that is that has ignited both sides, and I can see why. I can see why from both sides of it. I really can.
Well, I think we've got the two sides here, haven't we? With Ruth on one side and me on the other.
I should say we've got both sides, because Ruth and Harriet both feel very strongly
and
about
quite
it.
often we really agree on things, don't we, Ruth?
I'm going to probably just sit back and let you two discuss it, because I think you're going to get, as an audience, you're going to get both sides, and you're going to get both sort of areas that I tried to tease out in that interview. She has admitted that she has underpaid the tax. She said it was on legal advice that has turned out to be incorrect. So what she's saying is there was an error that she deeply regrets, but it was an error that she did not intentionally make. She acted in good faith, and she did not mean to underpay tax. Let me explain what's going on here. This is really bloody complicated, and it took me a while. I spent quite a lot of time over the past 48 hours when I got back to work reading through into this, so I do understand it, but bear with me. Basically, what has happened is Angela Rayner has a family home in Ashton, and that's in her constituency around Greater Manchester. That's where her family live. She bought a home in Hove on the south coast earlier this year. Now, it's emerged that she paid standard stamp duty for that home. So that's when you buy a house and it's your main home, you pay standard stamp duty, and she should have paid stamp duty for a second home. She should have designated Hove, she is now saying, as a second home. But she was advised by tax experts that it could be her main home, that she could pay standard stamp duty on it. And the crux of this is she paid £30,000 in tax on the property in Hove when she bought it, and she should have paid 70,000. So what's been going on in the papers in recent weeks is Angela Rayner flipped her homes. She changed her main residence from Ashton to Hove to dodge tax. Yeah, that's been the accusation. And what's happened is she's come out to explain how this error happened, and she's admitted that she thinks now she has underpaid tax, but the explanation is pretty complicated, so bear with me. The explanation of this is that the family home in Ashton is where her children live, and she is divorced from her husband. They divorced in 2023, her husband Mark, and they have a nesting arrangement in that home. And that basically means that one of the parents go and look after the teenager children in the house, right? But there's a complexity around that house because Angela Rayner's eldest child, who's now a teenager but under 18, has lifelong disabilities. And in 2020, a trust was set up for her son, and that trust has been set up to protect her son, to provide for her son, and to make sure, because he has lifelong disabilities, that he's provided for. In 2023, when Angela Rayner divorced, she put some of the interest she had in the property in Ashton into the trust, and her son is the sole beneficiary. In 2025, she then sold the remaining interest she had in the house, 25% of the house, to the trust. From the trust, she took out 150 grand, and she used that money as a deposit to buy the house in Hove. And she, like all of us, got a mortgage for the other 80% of the property. So she thought that the property in Hove, because she didn't have a financial interest in the property in Ashton, counted as her main home. She paid standard stamp duty. It now turns out that because of the complexities around a trust, because her son, I think, is under 18, she still was considered, in tax purposes, a beneficiary of that trust or whatever it is. But the upsum is that she should have paid second home stamp duty on the house in Hove. I hope everyone's following that. I hope I've made it clear. But the point of it is she's saying it was a mistake. She did it in good faith. She was very tearful about it. You saw that in the interview. Her opponents are saying you cannot have a situation where there's one rule for you, another for everyone else. You should have paid the standard tax. You know, other ordinary people cannot blame their accountants or lawyers when they underpay tax. And actually, this is a resigning matter. And that is where she really is in hot water over this. But there is very, very different views about whether she should be given almost the benefit of the doubt. And people understand that she made a mistake, as she puts it, or whether or not, regardless of that, under ministerial codes, under kind of how ordinary people would perhaps be treated if they had underpaid their tax and they get fined by the taxman, which is probably what could happen, whether she can legitimately stay on as a minister and housing minister.
I think part of the story as well is that this has been going on for a while. I think the Telegraph has mostly been doing the digging on this, and all the way through this up until Wednesday of this week. There's been really robust defence of her. There's nothing to see here. This is not a story. This is misogyny. This is a class war. It's because she's a working class woman that you're going after her, and she's done nothing wrong. And then suddenly it's like, actually, I maybe have done something wrong because of the way that they really fought on this story before the dam broke, really, this week. But also I think there is a level of sympathy. And I think you actually saw in Prime Minister's question, Kemi Badenoch didn't use all 6 questions about this. She had a flick at it, but she didn't major on it particularly. The heat and venom wasn't there in the same way that some others would be. But I think when you say the heat and venom wasn't there as some others would be, you immediately think back to the heat and venom that Angela Rayner would have done were this to have been a Tory and said that I took tax advice and I followed it and it turned out my advice was wrong. I didn't mean it honest. She would have eviscerated somebody for that.
I mean, just quickly on this as well, just on the advice, Ruth, because there's been a lot of noise in the media about journalists fuming because everyone was saying there's nothing to see. I think it's partly a feature of, as I understand it, Rayner has got advice from 3 different lawyers, or she's had 3 pieces of advice where she was told it was okay. And then when it began to be reported, as I understand it, she then she says it in the statement, she sought expert counsel. And at that point, the expert counsel said, oh, actually, this might not be okay. And that's the point. I think part of maybe the lack of information was actually because this is all happening in real time rather than people being stonewalled. But I know what it's like to be a journalist when you are chasing someone, everyone says nothing to see, and then there's like, there's a whole 3-hour epic to see. How frustrating that is.
There's also a sense here, there's sort of the legal advice community, where it's such a thing, has said some things on social media about, look, we're getting into a lot of trouble here, but there's a chap who's an absolute tax expert called Dan Needle. He does a lot of media work, and one of the things that he pointed out was, he said that it is really unusual for somebody to pay the wrong amount of stamp duty when they're receiving professional tax advice. And he says that the three most likely possibilities are that either that Angela Rayner got the law wrong, or that she didn't take the right advice, or that she didn't disclose all of the facts to the law firm. I mean, we don't know what that is. Presumably, she's going to pass the legal advice she received onto the ethics advisor who's looking at this story, but for the government. But I don't know whether that is going to come into the public realm, whether we get to see that.
I mean, look, Harriet, it's really clear here, and seeing, for me, interviewing Angela Rayner yesterday, seeing her like I saw her, I've never seen her like that. But she is fighting now for her political life. Do you think she can survive this?
I think she absolutely should survive it. These are not usual circumstances. This is a sum of money which is given for the child. It's not given to the parents. The parents can't spend it. It's not their money. So it has to be put in a trust. And the issue about transparency is that family court proceedings where they involve a child are, especially as this involves a marriage breakdown as well, because, as you say, this house is used by Angela Rayner's husband as well as by herself, her former husband, because they split up, that there's confidentiality around family court proceedings, that you're supposed to keep it confidential, and it's breach of a court order to actually speak about it. So my assumption is the reason why she was not putting all the facts out there is because it would have been a contempt of court for her to do it. When Dan Needle says Angela Rayner got the law wrong, I mean, I think that is a ludicrous thing to say. She is not a lawyer. It's not her job to get the law right or wrong. It's her job to get the right legal advice and support for her son and for herself. She does not own this house in Lee. It is owned on behalf of her son by a trust. It is not her house. She can't do with it what she wants. She can't sell it. She can't rent it out. She can't decide who lives there. It is there for her son. So then when she's buying the flat in Hove, that is her property. She is buying that. So the idea that she is advised, because you don't own the house in Lee, this flat in Hove is the only flat, the only property you own. Therefore, you pay the stamp duty for somebody who's buying their only property. And so it's not outlandish, unreasonable advice for her to have been told that, and it's not at all wrong for her to have accepted that advice. HMRC is going to have to be the final arbiters on this, and it might be that HMRC, thinking about, Angela Rayner is not the only person in this situation. There are other people around the country whose homes will be owned in a trust for the child. And therefore, it will not just affect her, this ruling, it will affect others. And it might well be the case, it's not beyond the bounds of possibility, that HMRC says, you didn't actually make a mistake, your first advice was right, and your second advice was wrong. And I think the other thing that we're seeing here is we're seeing a mother in public life. And I am so full of admiration that this woman, who's had a child, one of her children with disabilities, and all the understanding that brings with her about what it's like fighting for and bringing up a child with disabilities, is also playing a leading role in public life. And I'm full of admiration for her for that. And I think that it would be an absolute travesty if the Prime Minister's ethics advisor says, as it turns out, the advice was wrong and therefore you've got to go for the chop. And I think that this is a story not just about paying the right amount of stamp duty. It's about how you actually be a mother in public life of a child with disabilities. And the question for the public is what has gone on here? That she's been trying to evade tax, that she's tried to dodge tax. And I know that that's a narrative all out there on social media. Or is the truth of it that she was just doing what she thought would be the right thing? And I think the truth of it is the second. And I think if she's labelled as a tax dodger and therefore loses her office of Deputy Prime Minister about this, I think that would be an absolute travesty.
So, Harriet, you just said that she would lose the office of Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah, because that's appointed by Starmer. She doesn't lose the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party.
Yeah, so she remains Deputy Leader.
She would remain Deputy Leader, but she would lose the office of Deputy Prime Minister because that's his appointment. And that's what the Laurie Magnus thing is. It's about her ministerial office.
Yeah. But she could...
But Starmer can't sack her from a Deputy Leader of the Labour Party.
No.
The only thing that can happen there is she can resign. But I hope she won't.
Be quite difficult for Starmer, that, wouldn't it, if he has to let her go as Deputy Prime Minister and then she remains Deputy Leader?
Well, it's all difficult, isn't it? Anyway, let's hope none of it happens.
Ruth, I really want to bring you in and I really want to hear your...
I think it will be decided actually in a weird way for Keir Starmer in the court of public opinion. And I think there's three sorts of levels of questions from three different angles, some of which are legitimate and some of which are illegitimate. And there's the sort of conversations that are having around the dinner tables right now where there's parents who absolutely feel for, the mother of a disabled child going, but why did the mother of a disabled child take £162,000 out of that child's trust fund to buy a swank pad for herself? That's an illegitimate question. You don't get to ask that. That's a private arrangement. There's probably constituents that are having questions about why is my MP wanting to buy a house a 5-hour drive from where she's supposed to represent and call that her main residence. I think that's borderline and that's probably something she wants to sort out locally. But the area where the questions are absolutely legitimate are why did the housing minister that makes the rules break the rules? And she's admitted that she broke them. She said she did it unintentionally, she took the best advice, but nevertheless the rules were broken. And that is an utterly legitimate question, and that's the kind of crux of all of this. And I guess this comes down to, benefit of the doubt. And I think the fall from your high horse is pretty high if you're the person that's been on the white charger acting to everybody else. And Angela Rayner was that attack dog. Her own words are there's one rule for them, one for everybody else when it came to anything the Tories did. And there's also the attritional element for Keir Starmer as well. He came in saying that he was going to be different, that there wasn't going to be any sleaze on his watch. And he already lost a homelessness minister for evictions and rent hikes. He lost an anti-corruption minister for corruption charges in another country. He lost a transport secretary, again, for having admitted corruption in her past life before she was appointed. And now there's this, somebody that has said, I did this wrong. I didn't know it was wrong when I did it, but it has subsequently proved to be wrong, and I'm very sorry. And it's that grey area that he's got to go with, and it's where does the public fall? And I think the problem that as politicians we often go onto the airwaves and say, look, I know this guy. This guy's a good guy. Like, he didn't mean to do this. I know the background to it. He's explained it. And people don't know politicians. They don't know Angela Rayner in the way you do Harriet, or the way I would know, a Tory colleague. And they don't believe us when we say, but they're really a good guy, because they just see sleaze after sleaze after sleaze story from the politicians. They think they're all bloody at it. And I think that the conversation across the country is going to be, they're all bloody at it, and Angela Rayner's just the same as everybody else. She's grasping. She wanted to make a quick buck. She made 40 grand out of this. It went right in her back pocket. And as a taxpayer, I have a right to demand that she pays for that. So I think this is a real knife edge one, and it could go either way. So it sounds like I'm hedging my bets here, Beth, but there's so many elements to this story and so many straws that pile up. Like, will one of them break the camel's back?
A lot of your colleagues as well are really pissed off about this because of Angela Rayner's ferociousness, unforgiving nature to other people that were found to have broken rules. And I guess when you say the court of public opinion, I mean, do you understand why your colleague? I mean, do you feel a bit like that, Ruth? Or are you more sympathetic?
I feel like Angela Rayner's a massive hypocrite, because she would never let somebody off with the rationale that she's put forward. But as a human being, I can look at her, I can see her being upset, and I can see how it might have happened. But then I can see the surrounding circumstances for other people that she's ferociously gone for and said, that's not good enough. There is nothing that you can say that mitigates for the fact that you did something wrong. You must go. It's because there is no element of grey in any of the attacks that Angela Rayner did. There is a sense of almost kind of sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. Like, if that's the bar by which you measure others, how dare you measure yourself by a lesser bar? I mean, I think that's what some of my colleagues are getting at.
We've talked a lot, and I hope you've all got a better perspective of where Rayner's coming from as a person and as a politician, and how that has been received politically. And much of it is now going to depend on what his ethics advisor finds. And I think even if Laurie Magnus does exonerate her and say she did not break the ministerial code, and looks at the evidence and looks at the paperwork and accepts that this was an error made in good faith, I think a lot of people will say it's a kangaroo court then as well. So I don't think it goes away, but I think it allows the PM to keep her in post, and then she has got a battle in the court of public opinion. I really think she does. But this is something, Harriet, that the PM said, and this is about enforcing standards from Tom Baldwin's biography of him. This is Starmer. He said, "People only believe we're changing politics when I fire someone on the spot. If any minister makes a serious breach of the rules, they will be out," he says. What if it's someone as vital to his project as Rachel Reeves? PM says it doesn't matter who it is, they will be sacked. Starmer replies, staring back, unblinking. That's Tom Baldwin's words. I mean, that this is the problem, isn't it? There is loads of grey in this.
It's a real issue of judgment. But the question is whether or not you think, and whether Keir Starmer thinks, she has done anything wrong. I don't think she has done anything wrong, and I think the facts actually matter here. And I think if your Deputy Prime Minister hasn't done anything wrong, then you should stand by them, because strength is often to fire somebody, but strength is sometimes to keep somebody and just say, you know what, she got legal advice. She was not in any way, shape or form trying to tax avoid, and she was entitled to rely on that advice. And if it turns out that advice was wrong, then she remedies it.
We're going to have to wrap this bit. We've got to move on to Ruth's favourite subject, comms.
But let's put the Deputy Prime Minister hanging by a thread to one side.
Just quickly, right, who thinks that Angie Rayner can survive, Harriet? Do you think she'll survive?
I hope she'll survive, and I think it'll be a travesty if she doesn't.
Okay, Ruth?
I think she can, if nothing else comes out. If there's more to come and she's not cleared the decks, then I think she's in trouble.